recently I made a video reviewing Metroid 2, and I made note that I used the Super Game Boy 2, as well as several on-screen cues alerting you to the fact that I used a Super Game Boy 2, which most people are aware of the Super Game Boy, and for good reason, because it's awesome. But a lot of people have not heard of the Super Game Boy 2, and I was one of those people. It's one of those things that I discovered thanks to the magic of Wikipedia. And this is the original Super Game Boy. It's a little dirty. I need to clean that up because that looks gross. But this is the original Super Game Boy. I've had this since it very first came out. I remember seeing the commercial and being super excited for this because I have a ton of Game Boy games and I could play them on the TV with my Super Nintendo controller, and it's just a pass-through cartridge. Yeah. And you can play all your Game Boy and these black Game Boy Color games that will play in a regular Game Boy. And one day, while Wikipedia-ing around, I heard of the Super Game Boy 2, which looks like this, and it's an upgraded version. The first thing you'll notice visually about it is it's shaped a little different, it's a little rounder, and it's, translucent blue. And this particular one is Japanese. I imported this for $15 after shipping from someone, in Japan that has an eBay account. And this is a Super Famicom cartridge. This is the only Super Famicom cartridge I have. And I also read, I believe on Wikipedia, that this would play Game Boy Color games. And I thought to myself, ooh, that would be awesome. I would love to play my Game Boy Color games. And I assumed it meant Game Boy Color games. Games that will only play on a Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance and up, So I bought this, found it for $15. It also has a power LED on it. Let's see, it's over here. It has a power LED. And I believe there is an LED, there's a green LED in here for when you're connected with the transfer cable. I believed that the Wikipedia article just said it'd play Game Boy Color games. So I got one so that I could play Metal Gear Solid with the Super Nintendo pad. I wish I liked my Game Boy player more. I mean, it's great. The only problem is it uses a GameCube controller, which kind of sucks, because the D-pad's too tiny and the analog stick for, Game Boy games just doesn't work right. So I wish I liked it more, but whatever. So I finally get this, and I throw in a Game Boy Color game. I believe it was Metal Gear Solid, and I get an on-screen message saying the Game Boy player is not, or the Super Game Boy is not compatible with this software, Metal Gear Solid. So I was pissed. Then I thought, well, maybe it has enhanced color for when you're playing Game Boy Color games like this. And I haven't actually tested that out, but I thought maybe that's what they meant. So we're going to take a look. Since I'm making a video about the Super Game Boy 2, I'm going to make a video comparing the two and what their menus look like and all the options. The little backgrounds that, make the border around the Game Boy games are different. And yeah. And I do believe there is an American version. But I read this in the same Wikipedia article, I believe. So again, take it with a grain of salt. That this was released in America in 1998, but only through mail order, probably through Nintendo Power or something. So there may be American versions like this. And I believe I've seen a picture of it, and it looks exactly the same. But this is a Super Famicom cartridge. So you do have to modify your Super Nintendo to play these. inside your Super Nintendo, there's two little tabs that fit into these grooves. Super Famicom carts are a little bit smaller. They also don't have those grooves. So you have to either open your Super Nintendo and take a Dremel and cut those out, or do like I did and just use a pair of needle nose pliers and yank them out. So that was a hell of a lot easier. And I didn't, have to walk my lazy ass to the garage and get any tools. But this will work in a North American Super Nintendo as long as you yank out those little tabs. So anyway, let's take a look at the Super Game Boy and the Super Game Boy 2 in action. And for demonstration purposes, we're going to use Zelda DX, and we're going to show off what happens when you put one of these in there. So, stick around, guys. Okay, and first we're going to be taking a look at the original Super Game Boy, and like in the first part of the video, I'm using Link's Awakening DX and Super Wario Land 3 as my examples. And I just go through all the options and show all of the default backgrounds. And all of the other options within the Super Game Boy and Super Game Boy 2. Now, I used to make stop-motion animation videos with the Game Boy camera, and I would record them to VHS with the Super Game Boy, and I'd always use that theater background because it just, makes sense. And man, I wish I could find that VHS. It's had a ton of movies. Ton of little movies I made with little clay sculptures and G.I. Joes. And whatever awesome toys I had at the time. Here you can pick custom colors for your 4-color palette. So you can make it as horrendously ugly as you want. You can even draw sweet little backgrounds all on your own. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think this is Super Nintendo mouse compatible, but I've never had one, so I can't test that out. And naturally, Ass Butt has been here. Alright, this is the Super Game Boy loading up a Game Boy Color game. And it tells you no, this will only work with Game Boy Color. And I assume it says the same thing in Japanese. Or it's saying death to the Gaijin scum. Same thing happens. The default background is the one that's built in with Link's Awakening. Those are various other default palette swaps. And the only real difference besides the hardware is these backgrounds are different. I think I used this in another video I've recorded but haven't edited and slapped on YouTube yet. I think I used that clear Game Boy background. So when my original Game Boy died and I bought a new Game Boy, that's right when the Play It Loud series came out, or towards the end of it. It was right before Game Boy Pocket, like a month before Game Boy Pocket. Anyway, I ended up getting a Play It Loud Game Boy, and it had the clear case, the clear shell, which I hated because it's smooth plastic, so it'd get all fingerprinty. You know, I was still at the age where I spent a lot of time in the back seat riding around places playing video games, and get all fingerprinty and gross. I wish I didn't sell that Game Boy though. I sold it for like a couple bucks at the used game store that I hate now, but was alright back then. So that's the only real difference between the Super Game Boy and Super Game Boy 2. Different preset backgrounds, and of course the actual hardware revision where it has the link cable port and the 2 LEDs. I use it just because, well, I bought the motherfucker, so I'm going to use it. And you get the same message. Thanks for watching, and stick around guys, I got more videos.